Welcome, everybody, to the Sheeple Is As Sheeple Does channel. The death toll in Texas has now risen to 82 people as of me recording this, and there's a lot of stuff to talk about because this is going to be the heavy push for climate change. This is going to be what I will show you later in the video, where Bill Nye and a lot of these bogus scientists, these people who pretend to be smart and intellectual on television that they put in the school system like Bill Nye. This is what they called the 9/11 that they needed in order to bring in climate laws. And as we move closer to Agenda 2030, that's what's going to happen here. We're talking carbon tax, but it's more than that. These carbon laws will enslave humanity the same way that they attempted to enslave humanity in 2020. We're talking about restrictions on where you can go, how often you can go, how often you could travel, where you can drive, who you can see, what you can do outside of your home versus inside of your home. That's what this is about. So if you didn't like the way things were going in 2020, you sure as you know what will not enjoy what is coming with these climate laws. So one of the things I want to point out, as I've obviously covered many times already in the last couple of days, depending on where you're watching this, I've covered it on the website, is a lot of the stuff going on with the missing children. And while they're talking about how this spot is going to continue to get hit over and over and over again, and people are talking about HAARP, there's also coding in how many children are obviously missing and how many children are actually confirmed dead. And the camp confirmed 27 campers and counselors have died in the Texas floods. And if you're familiar with the 27 Club, it's a very significant number to the occult. Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Kurt Cobain, a lot of people who have died mysteriously are a part of the 27 Club. There's significance in that number when we see those numbers pop up in news stories, just like there's significance in that image I showed you of two of the boys who went to the La Junta, which is spelled, it looks like it's La Junta, but it's La Junta campsite, where, of course, I covered all the stuff that went on over at that camp. And clearly there's something more to this story in regards to flooding out these specific areas. Of course, we'll always hear this narrative about lithium and resources and smart cities, but there's still more to the story, even obviously in Lahaina, with all of the children that just vanished off the face of the earth. And in this case, it seems like there is an obvious cover-up going on, and the 27 Club is just another hint at that. And as you saw, even just the image of the children on the news, where there's a pull-out shot, and you could see the two children on the couch and the news anchor, and what do they show you? They show you that pillow with the all-seeing eye on it. These are the ways that they code things. They code it with numerology and signs and symbols. It's what I've exposed the entire time I've been doing this, and it's one of the things they don't want exposed. And 27 is a significant number in the occult. But for anybody out there, if you haven't seen a lot of the stuff in regards to the storm, you could see the obvious bizarre weather patterns. You could see this thing just sitting on top of this specific area. And of course, it was a bullseye. They're hitting targets. That's what they're doing with weather modification. There's dozens, thousands. We have documentation of weather modification going on since the 1920s, the 1930s, the 1940s, and even your government admitting to spending on, federal funds going to atmospheric science and meteorological services going back to 1965 and 66 as being on the record. So I don't know what people actually think when they see these bizarre weather patterns, but of course they're being trained into thinking it has something to do with climate change, and that's what they're training everybody into. So before I get into the 9/11 of weather catastrophes, because that looks like what they're starting to move towards here with the story about the missing campers, the story about these young children who have lost their lives compared to what we heard with Helene. And of course, that was just as devastating, but we didn't hear many psyops attached to it other than them telling you that some of the people on the ground were going after the FEMA camps and the FEMA people were under attack. You didn't hear many stories about children. You didn't hear many stories about the people involved. In fact, you heard the story kind of just go away unless you were looking at what people were uploading to social media accounts. The mainstream media just moved away and pivoted away from that hurricane completely, because just like Lahaina, just like the fires in Los Angeles, people were talking about weather modification, directed energy weapons, obviously the smart meters on the homes. But here's a news clip. You're going to see a lot of this stuff now, because now they need to convince people out there of what happened, of how this could possibly occur. And I guess it's news to me, because as you'll hear this news anchor on Good Morning America say, apparently that this area that was hit by these flash floods is known as Flash Flood Alley all of a sudden, right? Remember when we had Tornado Alley? And then as I covered this year, of course, most videos gone, but they moved Tornado Alley to different locations. They were getting hit in areas that weren't normally in Tornado Valley. We're getting 50 tornadoes popping up at once, and then the media talking about Tornado Alley. Well, here they're going to talk about Flash Flood Alley. And then, of course, this is how they program the sheeple. They convince them of something that they don't understand, they can't comprehend. They make up big words, they throw it at everybody, and then those people go and repeat it. And what they're talking about here is what's called mesoscale convective vortex. This is how they're going to explain how this flash flood happened so fast, was so large, and is continuing to hit the same exact spot over and over. And this is basic sheeple programming 101. Good Morning America. Take a look at this.
Bring in Ginger, because Ginger, this same area is still under a flood watch today.
Yes, and I want to remind everyone, this is an area of our country, in Hill Country up to Texas, that is known as Flash Flood Alley. They also, going into this, had severe to exceptional drought. Now, obviously, we've had a ton of water, so that's going to play a part in the flood watch that is still up until 7 p.m. It includes the same areas that were hit, but also San Antonio and Austin. Overall, this is for 2 to 4 inches. Locally, up to 10 inches, guys. So this is a big deal the next 24 to 36 hours.
A very big deal. And Ginger, how did this even happen? So much rain falling in such a short time.
Right. Well, part of the problem is what we call an MCV, mesoscale convective vortex. It's a really slow moving system, and it's stuck. There's not a lot of steering winds to get it out of there. And then there are 3 sources of moisture from the Pacific, from the Gulf, and actually from remnants of Barry. That was a storm that hit Mexico more than a week ago. So put all that together, it's like having a kiddie pool and turning 3 faucets on all at once.
And Matt Gutman, in his report, he was telling us there are questions on the ground right now about these warnings and when they went out. What do we know?
Yeah, we know from the AP, they said the National Weather Service offices there were more than staffed. They were staffed extra, actually, which is normal. The National Weather Service confirming to us that that's called surge staffing ahead of a big event like this. The warnings went out, starting with the flood watch at 1:18 p.m. the day before. So that's the day before into the evening of. The WPC puts out this saying 3-inch per hour rainfall rates. They're saying this is going to be bad. Again, 6 p.m. the night before. By midnight, that heavy rain begins. And then at 1:14 a.m., the first flash flood warning goes out. That's the type that goes out on the NOAA weather radio. That's the type that would fly onto your phone. And it had a considerable tag, meaning this is bigger than your run-of-the-mill flood warning. Then the river starts rising, and by 3:35 a.m., that wording is upped. It says, move to higher ground now, act quickly to protect your life. I have to say, just a button here, that having a NOAA weather radio would be very important for everybody, because I think a lot of people are scared, thinking, what's going to happen if I go out camping? Giving yourself just a couple extra minutes. Nothing was perfect here, but guys, there's certainly something that can help, and having that available to you is big.
Boy, I sure can. Okay, Ginger, thanks.
So the majority of people with common sense should know that this is weather modification that's taking place. These weather phenomena, such as, let's just use an example here, right? Like I mentioned, Tornado Alley. How about how all these storms are now going against the jet stream? They're going in the opposite direction. Oh, it's climate change, right? How these fires and stuff they claim up in Canada, these natural fires from climate change are happening. How the wind is blowing all the way down across the U.S. How the northern lights are now visible in all countries, and even as far down as Florida in the United States of America. They continue to make it up as they go. And that's a perfect example right there, telling you about mesoscale convective vortexes, so that the sheeple out there don't go, yeah, it is a little bit weird that the storm is sitting there. Then it's pummeling that area over and over and over again. Same pattern that we saw with Helene, where we see these storms circling back and hitting the same location multiple times. It's no different than when you're watching a documentary, which is really probably propaganda on the History Channel, where you hear about these military leaders targeting a specific location and hitting it over and over and over again. Silent weapons for quiet wars. And we need to make people educated on weather modification. Now, of course, this is a big coincidence, right? Listen to this clip of Bill Nye that I've used in the past where he's talking about it would take a 9/11 like event to convince people that climate change is real. And on top of that, he even admits to the greatest form of mind control, which is repetition, of how they need to continue over time to get this into people's heads that climate change is real so that they believe climate change is real. And then they could obviously implement their climate laws, which again, will look exactly like what you saw in 2020, just worse when they start telling you what you can eat, how often you can shower. Think it was bad then when they just took your job away and tried to poison you? Well, it's going to be a lot worse. But here, how convenient that Bill Nye was talking about an event that would be 9/11 like with the weather that would actually bring change.
If you meet with people who don't believe in climate change, don't believe in global warming, and there are a lot of them, what do you say to them? What do you say to them to convince them?
So if I could convince people in one sitting, that would be fabulous, but that has proven quite difficult. I tell everybody it takes years where people see the evidence, and the problem we have in climate change is we don't have a 9/11 or a Pearl Harbor. It's slow motion. So everybody that I speak with acknowledges that the climate is changing. Just the nudge that we work on, and people on my side of this, is pointing out that humans are causing it.
So of course that's convenient. That's what they've been trying to do, I believe, for the last couple of years. I believe with Hurricane Helene, I think that they were trying to do it then, and I don't think they expected so many people to push back against FEMA, so many people to expose what was going on. And then what'd they do? Well, the mainstream media just stopped talking about it, right? In Lahaina, they stopped talking about it. They were trying to shove Oprah and The Rock down everybody's throats. And what were people saying? This is garbage. This is bullcrap. These people are land grabbing. They are literally like land developers moving people out of areas that they want to build in. And we know they want to build these smart cities. They openly tell us that they want to do this over and over and over again. Well, how do you think they're going to do it? You think people are going to willingly give up their property, let them demo it, and then build a new house? You think they're going to do that for free for people? They're going to move us around like pawns in the game. So Bill Nye talking about the 9/11 like weather catastrophe is obviously, this could be what they're going to reference because the mainstream media is all over it day in and day out. You have that coded story about the campers. You also have mysterious footage of campers being taken out of Camp Mystic, which, again, I've broken down numerous times with the connections to Camp Mystic and the Bushes and Lyndon B. Johnson and powerful senators and governors and Laura Bush, and you can go on and on and on about all the bizarre things. And then you look at it and you go, well, let's see how they word stuff with Camp Mystic, and they talk about how it's training grounds. Well, that's not something you commonly hear with a Christian camp or a Christian church. You don't go, hey, I'm going to church on Sunday for training. That's more like a military operation. You say, I'm going to church, to hear the good word, to hear the gospel, right? Or whatever, something along those lines. You don't go, I'm going to church because I'm getting my training done. So there's a lot of things obviously surrounding, including the 27 Club. Now, Agenda 2030 is what needs to be noted here because they need a massive event like this, and there's going to be more to bring in the climate laws for Agenda 2030. Okay, the framework of Agenda 2030 is to begin directly dictating specific climate laws over all of our lives, which will change the way that we live. Remember, Larry Fink, all these clowns, Palantir that I've exposed, common theme that these people talk about, big tech, big corporations, controlling human beings' behavior. Well, guess how they're going to do that? They're not just going to do that with these ridiculous laws that they pass about hate speech, getting people to say certain words, not say certain words. They're going to do that by initiating climate laws that will force you into changing. Like Larry Fink said, forcing behaviors so that you don't buy certain things, you don't shop a certain way, you don't speak a certain way, you don't look a certain way, you don't dress a certain way. They're going to control it down to the point where, as I've even said in the past, some of these climate articles that come out from the World Economic Forum, what are they talking about? They're talking about 3 outfits per household, per person, per year, right? Things like that, where you're living like a prisoner. That's what the goal for them is, and they need to continue to beat this into people's heads. Now, the other thing that's interesting with all of this is the convenient timing of HAARP having an open house, because when these events happen, you start to see a lot of people on social media bring up HAARP. Now, they should be bringing up more than just HAARP. They should be bringing up chemtrailing, geoengineering. They should be bringing up those 5G towers that don't make anybody's phone any faster. There's lots of things that go into weather modification. In fact, they should be bringing up that Air Force document that's called Owning the Weather by 2025. And all the stuff I've shown everybody who's followed my channel over the years in regards to them bragging and openly talking about he who controls the weather will control the world. So people are talking a little bit about HAARP, and at least that's a good start. But what's HAARP doing? Well, HAARP's having an open house to try to obviously tell people that that's not what they do. And the sheep will eat this stuff up because they see this and they go, they're not hiding anything. So they could come out and lie and they could say, hey, our antennas are just, they're just shooting some rays up into the sky. Forget the articles that are out there that have exposed where they talk about simulating the aurora borealis, right? Which is why you saw the northern lights all over the world, because there's lots of HAARPs all around the world. It's not just in Alaska, but they want you to think it's only in Alaska. And, oh, by the way, they could simulate the northern lights. Don't be suspicious about that. So they're having an open house to try to obviously discredit anybody out there talking about HAARP, and it will work on the sheeple. But what's also interesting to note is this is one of the articles that's out there on HAARP right now. HAARP researchers want you to know that they're just normal Alaskans doing really cool science. And this is like a giant middle finger to everybody. Like, look at this. This guy wearing a tinfoil hat. I love HAARP. He's taking a picture in front of these towers. I mean, this guy is just, it reminds me of when CERN, and I don't know what anybody's take is on, I know some people believe in the Mandela effect, some people don't. Obviously, there's some stuff to all this stuff going on with some of the changes, but I've never done a deep dive on Mandela. It's not something that really fascinates me or interests me. In fact, it's kind of just one of those topics I leave to other people. But we all remember when CERN put out a music video and then held up that Mandela sign in front of everybody. He's giving a thumbs up, but he might as well be giving the middle finger. Well, that's exactly what they're doing up at HAARP, right? You got the HAARP researcher taking a photograph, UAF HAARP with a tinfoil hat, right? Right before, of course, these storms actually happened. They hit on the 4th of July of all days when we were all talking about some type of bioweapon was the focus on July the 4th. Some type of a potential attack was on a lot of people's minds in regard to everything going on in Gaza and Israel. But look what they did, right? They went to weather modification, which is going to be the thing they continually go to because they know it's too much for the sheeple to wrap their heads around. They've been trained to think you can't control Mother Nature. They've been trained to think that these people in power don't have the slightest clue on how to do those types of things. Yet, we've been told thousands of times about how in Dubai they cloud seed and can manipulate and modify the weather. But of course, they would never do that against you. There's been wicked people for centuries that we've heard about, right? They tell us whether it's a fake history or real history behind people like Hitler and Stalin, right? So people in their mind should say, wow, there's really sick people if those stories are true about them. They're really wicked people, right? But why would you not think in 2025 that there's not wicked people who want to control and rule and have power over everybody's every step with technology? It's hard for people to grasp, right? Well, because they've weakened people, and it's too scary of a thought for the majority of the sheeple out there. So they used weather modification. They'll continue to use it. And don't be surprised if you start hearing some of this terminology with 9/11 weather events, 9/11 climate change events. We need to do something about it because by 2030, they're going to have some of these climate laws in place. And don't believe this stuff with Donald Trump and how, they're going to get rid of NOAA. He's taking down the National Weather Service. As I've discussed many times. The whole thing with Trump taking down the National Weather Service is so that they can do these flash floods. They can do these tornadoes all over the place and give you no notice to get out of these areas. Because guess what? These people are more sinister than any serial killers you've ever been told about, which, again, all the serial killers, for the most part, go back to the CIA anyway. So we have over 82 people dead. I have a lot of this stuff. If you're hearing this on the website, obviously, make sure you check out the videos that are on here about Camp Mystic, and the other camp, Camp Lahana. We have 27 confirmed dead. We have our 27 code there. And again, they're training the sheeple into things like mesoscale convective vortex, because once these people hear stuff like that, they'll try to use that against you when you talk about weather modification because, well, they're trained sheeple. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.